Hello, welcome to La Excellence. In our recap program, we are discussing monthly current affairs videos. In this video, let us understand January 2021's current affairs, and this is part 3 of it. Let us discuss IR related concepts, international related concepts. Our first issue is FATF. It is an international grouping. It protects the integrity of the financial system. Pakistan is placed in the grey list of this particular grouping. In this context, why it is placed in the grey list and what is this list system? FATF has two lists. One is grey list, second one is blacklist. If any country compromises the financial integrity through money laundering, terror funding, etc., it is placed in these two lists, grey list or blacklist. Initially, it will be placed in the grey list and it will be given a list of measures to take. If it fails to take these measures, it will be placed in blacklist. What happens when a country is placed in the grey list? Other institutions, especially foreign financial institutions, they can decline the financial transactions. Foreign banks, financial institutions, they would be wary with regard to transacting Pakistani banks, and accessing funds from international markets become difficult. Funds from World Bank, IMF, etc., they also become difficult. That means financial gathering becomes difficult for that country if it is placed in the grey list. If it is placed in the blacklist, if it is upgraded to the blacklist, then these transactions might be fully curtailed. That is the issue with grey list. Now, why Pakistan is placed in the grey list? Pakistan is accused of money laundering and accused of terror funding. India has also submitted the certain proofs regarding Pakistan's role in terror funding. In this context, let us briefly understand what is this FATF, Financial Action Task Force. This was set up in the year 1989 with 37 member countries. Its headquarters is located in OECD's office, that is in Paris. It releases major report known as Global Money Laundering Report. It is an intergovernmental body. It aims to prevent the illegal activities, and FATF works to identify national level vulnerabilities, and it protects the international financial system from misuse. This is the primary objective of FATF. Next issue is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is part of One Belt One Road. CPEC corridor connects Kashgar province from China to Gwadar province in Pakistan, and it has three major highway components. One is Karakoram Highway, two is Indus Highway, three is Markan Coastal Highway. Along with the highway, there are railway lines that are planned, power projects and other infrastructural projects that are planned under this CPEC project. Certain part of this corridor goes through Gilgit-Baltistan province. This is a disputed territory between India and Pakistan. That is why CPEC project is opposed by India, because India says it is against Indian sovereignty. But there is a term with regard to CPEC and other projects under One Belt One Road, that is debt diplomacy. China is going for a debt diplomacy. That means it invests, it lends the money. Through that, it tries to control the diplomatic relations of that country. Let's say Hambantota project in Sri Lanka. It has taken it for lease for 999 years because Sri Lanka was unable to repay the money. Similarly, even CPEC corridor, it can go through this debt trap and uncertainty of implementation of CPEC corridor because of the extremism activity near the Durand line. These are all the uncertainties with regard to CPEC. CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It is part of China's One Belt One Road initiative. Next issue is Sri Lanka and 13th Amendment. Last year, after the presidential elections, there were two demands. One, restoration of powers with the president of Sri Lanka. Two, removal of 13th Amendment. To restore the power of president of Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan Parliament has passed 20th Amendment. So earlier, using 19th Amendment in 2015, the Parliament of Sri Lanka has passed a resolution, has passed an amendment to the Constitution that strengthened the power of parliament and reduced the power of president. But again, the presidential powers are restored through 20th Amendment. And now there's one more demand with regard to constitutional amendment in Sri Lanka, that is 13th Amendment. What is this 13th Amendment? Why this is important? Why is this significant to India? Let us understand. Before that, in the month of January, Tamil rights issue was in news. Fishermen issue was in news. Because of these two, let us understand the comprehensive picture of India Sri Lanka's political issues. There's one more issue with regard to political issue between India and Sri Lanka, that is Kachativu Island. First, let us understand Tamil rights issue. 13th Amendment. In the year 1987, Indo-Sri Lanka Accord was signed between Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, Sri Lankan President J.R. Jayawardene. In this context, according to this particular agreement, Sri Lanka has to respect the minorities, that is, Sri Lankan Tamils. Because in India we have Tamil sentiment, Tamil Nadu states, etc., because of which Indian government has negotiated with Sri Lanka to protect the rights of Tamils. And under this particular accord, Sri Lankan parliament has passed an amendment which is known as 13th Amendment. Under this particular amendment, provincial councils will be appointed. Under these provincial councils, where the majority of Tamils are there, they will be given land rights, police rights, etc. 13th Amendment was passed, provincial councils were formed, but rights over police and land was not given to the Tamils in any of the provincial councils. Now, because of revival of Sinhalese majoritarianism and election of Mahendra Rajapaksa and his brother, that has led to revival of the demand for revoking this 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment is seen to be as divisionism in the society of Sri Lanka, and it is seen as India's dominance over Sri Lanka. That is why some of the groups, they are asking the government to revoke this particular amendment. But India is pressing that provincial councils should be given the real powers. That is the issue between India and Sri Lanka with regard to Tamil rights. Second issue is fishermen issue. India and Sri Lanka, they have finalized international maritime boundary line in the year 1976 itself. According to this is the international maritime boundary between India and Sri Lanka, and there are certain islands in between such as Kachativu Islands, etc. Fishermen, as the EEZ is overlapping, Indian fishermen cross over to this, Sri Lankan fishermen cross over to this for search of fish. In this context, when they cross this line, Sri Lankan Navy is arresting Indian fishermen, Indian Navy is arresting Sri Lankan fishermen. In this regard, Indian fishermen getting arrested, the chances are very high because we are using big trawlers which are prohibited in Sri Lanka. That is also one of the reasons. Now, this issue also needs to be addressed. This is a sensitive issue because livelihoods of fishermen is involved in this. Next issue is Kachativu Islands. Kachativu Island, these are the island groups that are located on the international maritime boundary between India and Sri Lanka. This island is used by many fishermen to dry the fishing nets, etc. This is uninhabited region. But now there are large reserves of oil and gas that are found nearby. That is why both the countries, India and Sri Lanka, are claiming this particular island. Name of the island is Kachativu Island. This is located in the Park Strait region between India and Sri Lanka. Next issue is Gulf Cooperation Council. Recently, Gulf countries, especially GCC countries, have signed Solidarity and Stability Deal during the 41st Gulf Cooperation Council Summit at a place called Al Ula, Saudi Arabia. What is this Solidarity and Stability Deal? This is a peace deal between Qatar and other Gulf countries. Qatar is a Persian Gulf country. In the year 2017, many of the countries in the Gulf region, so these countries and other Arabic countries, they have imposed sanctions on this country, saying that this is supporting the extremist groups. Indirectly, Qatar is establishing close ties with Iran. That is the major reason why Saudi Arabia and its allies have imposed sanctions on Qatar. Now, under this Solidarity and Stability Deal, these sanctions were removed and they have reopened the land, sea, and air borders to Qatar. In this context, let us understand what is GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. GCC is a political, economic, social, and regional organization. It was established in the year 1981 with these countries Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman. Here, Iraq, Iran. These two countries also have boundary with Persian Gulf, but these two are not part of Gulf Cooperation Council. Yemen is not part of Gulf Cooperation Council. Next issue is UNSC non-permanent membership to India. India has become non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council, and this is the 8th time. Non-permanent membership is given for 2 years term from 2021 to 2022. In this context, India has committed as a non-permanent member as 5S approach. What is this 5S approach? 5S stands for respect, dialogue, cooperation, peace, and prosperity as the pillars of Security Council. India wants to promote these 5 qualities. What is UNSC? UNSC is an intergovernmental organization formed in the year 1944 under the Charter, UN Charter 1945. 15 countries are there, 5 permanent countries which have veto power, and 10 non-permanent countries with 2 years of term. India is elected as non-permanent member as the 8th time, for the 8th time. Major objective of UNSC is to maintain the international peace and security, to investigate disputes or situations with regard to international which leads to international friction, and it can impose sanctions. It can take direct action using United Nations Peacekeeping Force UNPKF. United Nations Peacekeeping Force under United Nations Security Council can directly intervene in the conflict zones. Next issue is World Economic Forum. Recently, our Indian Prime Minister has addressed World Economic Forum's Davos dialogue through video conferencing. World Economic Forum meeting is conducted annually, which engages the leaders, global leaders, regional and industries. Regional and national industrial leaders are part of this World Economic Forum. Mandate of this particular forum is to strive towards building better standards for the corporate governance and for entrepreneurship. The reports released by World Economic Forum include Global Competitiveness Report, Global Information Technology Report, Global Gender Gap Report, Global Risk Report. Here, Human Capital Index is released by World Bank, but World Economic Forum is consulted while releasing this particular report. Human Capital Index is released by World Bank, not World Economic Forum directly, but it is consulted. Next issue is New START Treaty. New START Treaty. During the Cold War period, USA and USSR made certain nuclear cooperation agreements which prohibits development of unchecked nuclear weapons. In this context, there is a treaty called START 1 Treaty, and now New START Treaty is upgradation over that. New START Treaty, recently Russia has agreed for extension of New START Treaty which expired on February 2021. This is a treaty between USA and Russia that tries to reduce or limit the strategic offensive arms, especially nuclear arms. Strategic nuclear development vehicles, these numbers and warheads will be reduced under this. Strategic nuclear delivery vehicles are intercontinental ballistic missiles which have range above 5,500 kilometers. According to this New START Treaty, USA and Russia, they have to limit the development of these nuclear warheads and nuclear missiles. USA and Russia together, they hold more than 90% of nuclear weapons among all the countries. USA has suspended Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty. USA and Russia both withdrew from Open Skies Treaty. In this context, extension of New START Treaty is an important step forward in limiting the nuclear race and competition between USA and Russia. Next issue is UN Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. India has recently said that India is not part of this treaty. That's why it is not bound by any of the obligations under the treaty. Why India has made this statement? It is because Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, it came to force on January 22nd, 2021. That's why India said we are not party to it. That's why we are not bound by any of the provisions of this treaty. This is the agreement. This is the first legally binding international agreement that tries to eliminate the nuclear weapons completely. But the nuclear weapon holding countries such as India, USA, China, all these countries, they did not support the treaty. Why? They have the nuclear weapons, and this treaty says eliminate all the nuclear weapons completely. Why will these countries agree? That is why they did not sign, they did not ratify this treaty, all they did not ratify this. What is India's stand? Nuclear weapons, they provide the nuclear deterrence, and as India's neighbors, such as Pakistan and China, they have the nuclear weapons. It is not possible to completely eliminate nuclear weapons as of now without them eliminating them, because nuclear weapons act as strategic deterrence to India. That is why India did not sign. But India is committed for negotiations on fissile material cut-off treaty. Fissile material cut-off, that India is willing to sign and ratify. See, this particular fissile material cut-off treaty is a proposed international agreement. This agreement prohibits the production of enriched uranium and plutonium. India has not signed non-proliferation treaty and comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty. These two, especially non-proliferation treaty, is by the nuclear weapon holders. Comprehensive test ban treaty is under UN. India did not sign both these agreements under with regard to nuclear weapons. Let us understand important features of International Nuclear Weapons Treaty. These are the countries that are signed and ratified. Ratified major countries with nuclear weapons, they did not ratify. If the nuclear holders did not ratify, what is the use of it? Yes or no? Right. This treaty prohibits the use of nuclear weapons or national territories. India said, we have no first use policy. Anyway, we don't use any of the nuclear weapons on the non-nuclear weapon countries. In this context, this treaty asks us to disclose the nuclear weapons and how many do we have. And this treaty also asks us to remove them before signing the treaty. That means if we want to become the member of the treaty, before signing itself, we have to remove all the nuclear weapons that we have. So all the nuclear weapon countries, they said it is not possible. Next issue is Open Skies Treaty. Just now we discussed about New START Treaty, right? So this is Open Skies Treaty is a intergovernmental treaty between 30 countries. According to this treaty, member countries can check upon other country, let's say USA and Russia. USA's aircraft can go over the airspace of Russia and it can do surveillance on the defense installations. Similarly, Russia can do the same thing. This will bring the trust. That is why this treaty was signed. But last November, USA said Russia is not implementing the provisions of Open Skies Treaty in letter and spirit. That is why we are coming out. Recently, Russia also has said that if USA is not there, what is the use of we staying in that treaty? We are also moving out of it. That is why USA and Russia, both major countries of the treaty, have withdrawn from this. Next issue is South Asia Group for Energy. Recently, a high-level group built a South Asia-focused energy security architecture known as South Asia Group for Energy, SAGE, under Ministry of External Affairs. By which countries? BIMSTEC countries. What are these BIMSTEC countries? BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. It is an international organization that involves group of countries such as South Asia, Southeast Asia. Member countries of BIMSTEC include Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Bhutan and Nepal. Bhutan and Nepal are landlocked countries. They are not exposed to Bay of Bengal, but still they are dependent upon Bay of Bengal region. That is why they are part of BIMSTEC grouping. It was found in 1997 through Bangkok Declaration. Its headquarters is located in Dhaka, Bangladesh. There's one more grouping called SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It has 8 member countries. Try to compare membership and objectives of BIMSTEC and SARC. Next, let us understand society and social issues. First issue is Jaya Jaitly Committee. This is a task force formed by Ministry of Women and Child Development. This task force was appointed to relook at the age of consent of marriage for women. As of now, minimum age of marriage is 21 years for men and 18 years for women respectively. In this context, as per various acts, Hindu Marriage Act, Indian Majority Act, like that, there are different age groups that are prescribed, but overall this is the age group. Here, minimum age of marriage is different from age of majority. Age of majority is gender neutral, it is at 18 years. Now, this committee is tasked with to take a relook at the age of marriage for women. This committee has recommended that age of marriage for women, minimum age needs to be increased from 18 to 21 so that marriages will be delayed. It increases the nutritional levels among the women. It reduces the chances of child mortality. It increases the opportunities for the women for higher studies. These are some of the issues. Women rights groups, they say that this provision can be used to incarcerate young adults marrying without parents' consent. See what happens if a person is let's say 19, and if the minimum age is increased to 21. If the person marries at 19, that becomes illegal. That marriage becomes invalid. Only if they marry after 21, then only the marriage becomes legal. Before 21, if the person marries, that becomes illegal. So that is why women rights activists, they say that this can be used for this particular provision, that is, it can be misused this way. That is the issue here. Next issue is Girl Child and Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. Haridaspur village in Telangana, they celebrate the birth of girl child. Sarpanch and other leaders of the region, they have created the awareness among the people on importance of girl child, on the importance of gender equality. In this context, government has proposed Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. This scheme is a small deposit scheme for the girl child launched as part of Beti Bachao Beti Padhao campaign. This Sukanya Samriddhi account, it can be opened any time after the birth of girl child till she turns 10 with the minimum deposit of 250. Earlier it was 1000 rupees annually, now it is 250 rupees. Maximum deposit of 1.5 lakh rupees annually. This account can be opened in any post office and commercial banks. The account will be operational for 21 years. From the date of opening till the marriage of the girl after she turns 18. In between, partial withdrawal can be done of 50% of the amount after she turns 18 for her higher education. These are some of the provisions of Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. In these villages, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana and other measures that promotes the girl child, these are being taken up proactively. Next, let us understand the economy related issues. Our first issue is IIP and core sector. IIP means Index of Industrial Production. It is an indicator to measure the changes in the volume of production of industrial product during a given period. Generally, IIP is calculated for a period of 1 year. It is compiled by NSO, National Statistical Office, under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. It's a composite indicator that measures the growth rate of industry groups classified as mining sector, manufacturing, electricity, etc. Use-based sectors such as basic goods industry, capital goods industry, intermediary goods industry. Base year for IIP is 2011 and 12. What is the significance of IIP? Why IIP needs to be calculated? It is used by government agencies such as Ministry of Finance, RBI for policy making, and IIP is extremely relevant for calculation of advanced GDP estimates, advanced GDP gross domestic product estimates. Under IIP, 8 sectors are recognized as core sectors, 8 core sectors. These 8 sectors, they comprise 40% of weightage in IIP. What are these 8 core sectors? Refinery products, electricity, steel, coal, crude oil, natural gas, cement and fertilizers. These are 8 industries which are declared as core industries under IIP. They carry the weightage of 40%. This is important. Previously, this question was asked in UPSC. Next issue is NPAs in banking sector. NPAs means non-performing assets. NPA is a loan or advance wherein interest or the principal amount is overdue for a period of 90 days, and if the individual or the company is unable to pay it, bank declares that asset as NPA, non-performing asset. RBI decides what is the time period within which NPA needs to be declared. There's a classification of NPA. 1 is substandard asset, 2 is doubtful asset, 3 is stress asset. So criteria is declared by RBI. Based on this criteria, various banks they declare their NPAs. Why NPAs are high? NPAs during this COVID period, even prior to that, these are very high. Why? What is the reason? First one is there are historical reasons for that. That means present NPAs, they have the context of 2008. What is the significance of 2008, year 2008? 2008 has seen global financial crisis. That is why from 2008 onwards, NPAs have risen. Why? Because from 2004 to 2008 and 9, many companies have taken the loans considering the active economic performance of various indicators. But suddenly during global financial crisis, output and the demand for goods and services have fallen down. These companies, they have invested hugely and they have taken loans from the banks. All these initiatives, all the investments, they now went into loss. That is the major reason. Second one is investment. Major investment in infrastructural sectors. Because of delays in implementation, that also went into NPA. Laxity in lending norms by the banks. Banning mining projects and other Supreme Court judgments such as coal allocations, etc. That also led to NPAs in the banking sector. These NPAs needs to be addressed so that banks remain profitable. NPAs are harmful for the banking sector because higher level of NPAs needs higher level of provisions. Provisions means banks have to place certain percentage of total deposits with itself to manage the NPAs. That is why their lending capacity reduces, their profits reduces. So NPAs needs to be controlled. Next issue is faceless tax assessment. Last year, that is in August 2020, Prime Minister has announced 3 key structural tax reforms. First one is faceless assessment, second one is faceless appeals, third one is taxpayers' charter to reduce the tax disputes. Faceless tax assessment means assessment of tax is done through online. Taxpayer need not go to the tax authority's office. They can pay, they can reply to the queries of assessee, that is assessee officer, through online mode. This will increase the transparency, reduce the corruption, reduces the delays. That is why the faceless tax assessment is proposed and we are implementing it. Faceless assessment is administered through separate units within the tax department. And this assessment units, these all function under National E-Assessment Center and Regional E-Assessment Centers. In each region, collectively, let's say for 3-4 states, regional assessment centers are established. National E-Assessment Center is located in Delhi. Next issue is Western Dedicated Freight Corridor. Eastern and Western Dedicated Freight Corridors are partially operative now. There are other proposed corridors too, such as south, west, southeast, east to west dedicated freight corridors, but west and east, these are the 2 operational dedicated freight corridors. Stretches of these corridors are functional, not fully functional, but only stretches of these corridors are functional. Recently, our Prime Minister has dedicated 306 kilometers new Rewari, new mother station of the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor to the nation. It is situated in Haryana and Rajasthan states. This helps dedicated freight corridor. This helps in faster movement of goods. It helps in easing the transportation. It promotes the competitiveness of the export of goods. These are some of the advantages of dedicated freight corridor. Western Dedicated Freight Corridor connects Dadri of UP to Jawaharlal Nehru Port of Mumbai. This covers states of Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and UP. This is being funded by Japanese International Cooperation Agency, JICA. Next issue is USTR Section 301 report. Recently, this report has highlighted concerns regarding India's digital services tax. What is this USTR Section 301 report? United States Trade Representatives, it has determined that digital services taxes adopted by India are discriminatory and they are against the American companies and they are inconsistent with the international tax principles. But they have not taken any retaliatory measures. They said these are against the international principles. What is this digital services tax? Indian government has earlier imposed 6% of tax on the advertising companies, which is known as equalization levy. That means internet companies, let's say Google. For Google ads, we pay money. But Google company is located in USA, it is not paying any tax to Indian government. But the revenues are generated in India, yes or no? In that context, it has to pay certain amount of taxes within India. With that principle, equalization levy of 6% only on digital advertisements was introduced earlier, that is in 2016. Now, this equalization levy is replaced with uniform 2% of digital services tax on all trade and services by non-resident e-commerce operators with turnover more than 2 crore rupees, all digital services. Either it can be advertising services, e-commerce services, software services, on all services, 2% digital services tax is imposed, which is known as DST. USTR Section 301 means this is the report annually published by the USTR Trade Representatives Body that says that it is against the global principles, but USA itself, it has the laws that imposes tax on other countries' companies. So, that is why India said we are protecting our revenue resources. We are not going against any of the rules of international tax norms. So, India has supported our DST. Next issue is states to take the additional borrowing. Central has imposed certain criteria. What is that criteria? That can be an important prelims question. In the month of October 2020, central government has linked permission for additional borrowing of 1% of states' GSDP based on implementation of 4 reforms. What are these reforms? 1. Implementation of One Nation, One Ration Card scheme. 2. Ease of doing business reform. 3. Urban local body utility reforms. 4. Very important power sector reforms. Based on the implementation levels of these 4 reforms, states are given additional borrowing. Let's say Kerala. Kerala has taken additional borrowing. AP has taken additional amount. It has borrowed more than the limit. Generally, states have limitations on borrowing capacity. If center approves, then only it can borrow more after a certain limit. Earlier, 3% of GSDP was the limit. Now it's increased to 5%. Even after that, states wants to borrow more. In that context, these 4 are the reforms that are suggested by the center. If they fulfill these reforms, if they implement these reforms, then only they can borrow more. So these are 4 reforms that are proposed by the central government. Certain states have tried to implement. Under this reform-linked borrowing window, states can access up to 2.14 lakh crores on completion of all the 4 reforms. Here we have to recollect this article 293 section 3. This requires state governments to take permission from the central government, to seek the consent from the central government before raising the borrowings after a limit. Next issue is fiscal policy multiplier effect. In our economy subject, they are asking more questions on interrelated aspects. That means, what is the relationship of fiscal policy to the multiplier effect? Such questions are possibility. There are 2 mechanisms under fiscal policy. 1. Cut down the taxes. to increase the government spending. Such measures are known as fiscal stimulus. Reverse can also be possible, but in the recessionary conditions as we are in now, it does these two things. One, cut down the taxes. Two, increase the government spending. In both the cases, what happens? Money supply will be more, money will be available with the people, they demand more. As they demand more, production would be more. If the production has to increase, it has to take more people to produce, so employment would be more. Employment would be more, production would be more, demand would be more. That revives the economy. Such effect is known as multiplier effect. Let's take an example. Multiplier effect means, let's say if the multiplier effect is 3, that means for each rupee of fiscal stimulus, it leads to rupees 3 of income. That means if we invest 1 rupee, it gives us 3 rupees of income. Such effect is known as multiplier effect. That means government is losing the money because it is cutting down the taxes, it is increasing the spendings, but it leads to more wealth generation in the country, which in turn leads to more tax payments and more wealth generation. So this effect is known as multiplier effect. The fiscal policy, it can lead to fiscal stimulus. Fiscal stimulus is part of fiscal policy. Fiscal stimulus leads to multiplier effect. Next issue is Bank Investment Company, BIC. Bank Investment Company would be set up by the government under Companies Act 2013. That's why it's in news. BIC, it acts as a core investment company and it holds more than 50% of shares in public sector banks. The objective of this company is just to hold the shares. It's just a shareholder. Majority of the shares are with this particular bank investment company. This makes the business, it resembles the sovereign wealth fund. It just invests, that's it. PJ Naik Committee, PK Mohanty Committee, Kelkar Committee, they have recommended for such holding company structures, bank investment company. PJ Naik Committee has recommended for BIC. PK Mohanty Committee has asked to review the ownership guidelines and corporate structures of Indian private sector banks as well as the public sector banks. Kelkar Committee has assessed PPP and it has suggested for tax reforms and banking related investment reforms. Next issue is scale based regulation of NBFCs. NBFCs means non banking financial companies. These non banking financial companies are registered under Companies Law 2013. Recently, RBI has proposed tighter regulatory framework for NBFCs because recently IL&FS crisis, etc., they have led to more tightened regulations on NBFCs. According to these guidelines, 4 layers are there. One is base layer, second one is middle layer, third one upper layer, fourth one top layer. Base layer means this comprises NBFCs with asset size up to 1000 crores. They enjoy light touch regulations, that means not much regulation. Middle layer means they can have deposit taking NBFCs and HFCs, housing finance companies. They have tougher regulations. Upper layer means 25 to 30 NBFCs are selected. They'll be part of upper layer. They have strict regulations as banks. Top layer, they remain empty and RBI can put anyone there from middle layer, from the upper layer and middle layer. That means 4 layers: base layer, middle layer, upper layer and top layer. NPA recognition norms be lowered to 90 days from 180 days. Single exposure, group lending exposure norms should be there for NBFCs. Compensation packages for management should address the risk of NBFC crisis. These are some of the guidelines that are proposed under 4-layer approach of NBFCs. See, 4 layers: base layer, middle layer, upper layer and top layer. 4 layers of NBFCs under RBI's proposed guidelines. These are not implemented yet. These are proposed guidelines. Next is Sagarmala Seaplane Services. Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways is starting an ambitious project called as Sagarmala Seaplane Services with potential airline operators. What is the meaning of seaplane? It's a fixed wing aeroplane designed for taking off and landing on water. Important. This project is initiated under Special Purpose Vehicle Framework. through prospective airline operators. Project execution and implementation would be through Sagarmala Development Company Limited. Important. Sagarmala Development Company Limited, which comes under Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways. These airline operators, they will be invited to form a special purpose vehicles. These routes may be operated under government subsidized Udan scheme. Udan means Ude Deshka Aam Nagarik. In this context, let us understand what is this Sagarmala project. Sagarmala program was approved by Union Cabinet in the year 2015. This aims to develop holistic port infrastructure along the coastal states. There are four mechanisms: one through modernization, two mechanization, three through computerization. Another port-led development framework will be prepared. It includes establishment of railroad linkages with the port terminals so that it provides the last mile connectivity. 2. It develops the interlinkages with the new regions. It enhances the multimodal connectivity, which includes rail connectivity, inland water connectivity, coastal and road services are connected. Sagarmala project is an integrated port management, port infrastructural project. Important. The similar project is known as Bharatmala project, that is for roads and bridges. Next issue is Oxfam report on COVID inequalities. Recently, Oxfam International, which is an NGO, it has released inequality virus report. It has found that COVID pandemic has deepened the existing inequalities in India. To measure inequalities, we have income inequalities, we have an indicator known as Gini quotient. Gini quotient is used to measure the income inequalities. Here we are dealing with inequalities arising due to the pandemic. Oxfam International is a group of independent non-governmental organizations formed in the year 1995. Oxford Committee for Famine Relief. Oxfam full form is Oxford Committee for Famine Relief. This group, it collects the information on inequalities. Its secretariat is based on Nairobi, Kenya. Next issue is Global Risk Report. World Economic Forum has recently released 16th edition of Global Risk Report. This report was released based on global risk perception survey undertaken by more than 650 members of World Economic Forum. According to this report, short-term risks include infectious diseases, extreme weather events and livelihood diseases. Medium-term risks include IT infrastructure breakdown, asset bubble bursts, price instability, etc. Long-term risks include state collapse, weapons of mass destruction, biodiversity losses. Global Risk Report is released by whom? World Economic Forum. Recently, 16th edition of this is released. Please try to remember these 2 points. Next issue is Bad Bank. Recently, RBI has agreed to take a look at the proposal of creating a bad bank. In the later months, we are going to understand what are the actions taken by the RBI in setting up a bad bank. As of now, RBI said we will consider the idea of bad bank. What is a bad bank? There are NPAs, non-performing assets with the banks. These NPAs needs to be addressed. So before giving a loan, banks take the collateral. If anyone is not repaying the loan, these banks can sell off the land or property, whatever is placed with it as a collateral. But banks are not specialized in selling and purchasing the assets, etc. Their core domain is not that. That is why, if all these NPAs and the collaterals associated with the NPAs are transferred to a bank, which does only selling and buying of these assets, what happens? Will the efficiency of the bank increases or not? Yes. So in such context, such banks are known as bad banks. Already we have asset management companies, ARCs, and asset reconstruction companies. They does the same thing. But now bad bank is an idea which holds the NPAs of public sector banks. As of now, ARCs are there, but they're not dealing with public sector banks. The idea is to have such bank for holding the public sector debt. In this context, there are many countries like UK, Nigeria, Spain, Ireland, Sweden, Finland. They all have such structures, bad bank-like structures. Now, bad banks, please remember this, bad bank is not involved in lending or taking deposits, but it helps the commercial banks to clean up the balance sheets. That's it. It takes over the bad loans and it sells these bad loans, recovers the amount, and gives it to the public sector banks. Next, let us understand environment and disaster management related issues. First one is Project Dolphin. Gangetic dolphin was beaten to death in Uttar Pradesh. That's why it was in news. Killing river dolphin, Gangetic river dolphin, is punishable offence under Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Project Dolphin was established on the lines of Project Tiger, which helped the increase in the tiger population. Similarly, we launched Project Dolphin so as to increase the India's national aquatic animal, that is river dolphin, Gangetic river dolphin. This project was approved in 2019 during the first meeting of National Ganga Council headed by Prime Minister, and it is expected the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change this implements this particular project. These are some of the provisions with regard to Project Dolphin. The Gangetic River Dolphin is declared as National Aquatic Animals in the year 2009. Gangetic River Dolphin is declared as National Aquatic Animal. Next issue is electric mobility in India. India is the third largest oil importer in the world in terms of value and importing 228 metric tons of crude oil worth $120 billion. In this context, shifting towards electric vehicles, will this reduce the dependence on crude oil? Yes or no? And this also helps in reducing the carbon emissions. This saves the forex resources. This builds the domestic energy independence. That means it provides energy security. That is why government has formulated a policy to propel the electric vehicle sector. There is a scheme called as FAME, that is Faster Adoption and Manufacture of Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Scheme, FAME scheme. Under this, government has allocated $1.3 billion as the incentive for buying the electric buses, electric three-wheelers and four-wheelers. In the year 2019, various private sector, for example, Japanese automobile company Suzuki Motors, it set a manufacturing plant in Gujarat for producing lithium-ion batteries and electrodes, which are important for EVs. And these policies, they are embedded to align with the vision of 30%, to have a 30% vehicle fleet with the electric vehicles, electric mobility in India. With regard to electric vehicles, in the year 2030, National Electric Mobility Mission Plan was launched. FAME 1 was launched in 2015 by Ministry of Heavy Industries. FAME 2 is launched by, again, Ministry of Heavy Industry, and extended FAME 1 for the next 5 years. Now, what are the companies that make EVs in India? These are the automobile companies that make EVs in India. Next issue is river pollution, COD and BOD. Recently, Supreme Court has taken suo motu cognizance of pollution of water bodies by untreated sewage wastage. In this context, Supreme Court has directed the Delhi Jal Board to take measures to address the Yamuna water pollution. In this context, to measure the river pollution, we use two metrics such as BOD, biological oxygen demand, COD, chemical oxygen demand. Let us see the Yamuna river flow and the areas of dead zone. Yamuna river flows from Uttarakhand, from Yamunotri glacier. It turns and it moves near the border of Haryana. It enters nearby Delhi and it flows into UP. In UP, it flows and it meets with Ganga River. Now, this stretch from Panipat to Agra, this river stretch is known as Dead River because of heavy pollution, because of industry, sewage treatment, etc. This river zone is known as Dead River. After Chambal meets the Yamuna River, water becomes cleaner. What do we mean by BOD and COD? BOD means biological oxygen demand. COD means chemical oxygen demand. BOD and COD, as we said, these are two metrics used for measuring the pollution levels in the water. If BOD and COD are high, pollution is high. BOD and COD, if it is less, pollution would be less. This means BOD means the amount of oxygen that is required for the aerobic organisms to degrade the organic waste in the river water. That is known as BOD. Similarly, COD means for the chemical reagents to provide for the chemical oxidation process to degrade the organic waste. The amount of oxygen required is known as COD. BOD, COD, we said both are used for measuring the pollution levels in the water. Next issue is green tax. Government is proposing for green tax. According to this, government has announced the national vehicle scrappage policy. We are going to discuss it in the later months. For now, green tax as an issue was in news in 2021 January. Let's understand what is this. Recently, central government has announced its plans to impose green tax on the older vehicles. Why? Older vehicles, they emit lot of pollution. That is why under polluter pays principle, the government has proposed green tax on the older vehicles as part of road tax, so that these individuals, they won't use the old vehicles, they can switch to new vehicles. That is the idea behind green tax. Next issue is draft Arctic policy. Recently, India has drafted new Arctic policy. It aims at expanding India's role in scientific research, sustainable tourism, exploration of mineral oil and gas in the Arctic region. Arctic region, this surrounds the North Pole region. This has Arctic Ocean. This is Arctic Circle, Russia, USA, Canada, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden and Finland. These are the Arctic Circle countries. They form a grouping known as Arctic Council. India is an observer country in the Arctic Council. In this context, this draft Arctic policy is important because study of Arctic region is important for India because we have third pole region. What is third pole? Hindu Kush Himalayan belt is known as third pole region because they have permanent glaciers. That is why. Now, draft Arctic policy, the implementing agency for this draft Arctic policy is National Center for Polar and Oceanic Research. Objectives of draft Arctic policy is to promote the scientific study of Arctic, planning and explorations, promoting Arctic tourism. These are major objectives of draft Arctic policy. And scientific observation of Arctic ice melting is important for India because we are also facing similar issues with regard to our Himalayan region. Next issue is Management Effectiveness Evaluation Report of National Parks. Recently, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, it has released Management Effectiveness Evaluation of 146 national parks and wildlife sanctuaries in the country. Under this initiative, it is announced that from the year 2021, 10 best national parks, 5 coastal and marine parks, top 5 zoos in the country will be ranked and awarded every year. This MEE, Management Effectiveness Evaluation, is defined as the assessment of how well these national parks, wildlife sanctuaries are being managed. Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, it has already announced Management Evaluation of Indian Zoos framework. It has proposed that certain guidelines and criteria and indicators needs to be met so that these will be evaluated and ranked accordingly. MEE is the initiative by Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. Next issue is Global Climate Risk Index 2021. Global Climate Risk Index 2021 is released annually by the environmental think tank and sustainable development lobbyist known as German Watch. That means it's an NGO. German Watch releases Global Climate Risk Index 2021. It analyzes every year what are the threats to each country with regard to natural disasters and what are the losses. And it pushes the developing countries to promote the coping up mechanisms which are known as mitigation mechanisms. India was ranked 7th worst hit country in the year 2019. in the Global Climate Risk Index 2021. India is the seventh worst hit country with regard to natural disasters. Next issue is Sathi portal. Bureau of Energy Efficiency has developed MIS system for the state level action. State-wise, it maintains the database. It gives the annual targets and what are the energy efficient measures that are taken by each country and what are the targets, whether each state is meeting these targets or not. That is how this portal maintains the data. It is a portal for State Designated Agency SDA for the state level activities. It captures the status of energy efficiency in each state. We have many measures to promote energy efficiency, such as Ujala program, solar pump sets, etc. We have many measures. So this captures the energy efficiency activities that we have taken and it facilitates real-time monitoring of energy efficiency measures. It streamlines the decision making and compliances. That is how Sathi portal helps. This is by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Next issue is One Planet Summit. It is an event that brings together governments, international organizations, NGOs, businesses for the preservation of biodiversity. It is organized by France and the United Nations and World Banks. It is organized since 2017. This summit of 2021, it has four major themes. One is protection of terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Second one, promotion of agroecology. Third one, mobilization of funding for protection of biodiversity, deforestation and human health. Final one is deforestation and human health. In all these four major areas, One Planet Summit this discusses and promotes the policies. Next issue is Adaptation Gap Report. UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, it releases this particular report. First edition was released in 2014. The aim of this particular report is to inform the national and international efforts to advance the climate change adaptation. To deal with climate change, we have two major measures. One is adaptation, two is mitigation. So, this particular report mentions the measures taken by each country with regard to climate change adaptation. What are the recent guidelines given by UNEP with regard to adaptation? 1. Increase in the adaptation finance. 2. Strengthening the support of nature-based solutions. 3. Pursuing green pandemic recovery and prepare an adaptation plan at the national level and local level. This is the report given by UNEP. Next issue is India's e-waste clinic. India's first e-waste clinic was opened in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, and this enables the segregation, processing, disposal of waste from both households and the commercial units. Waste means here e-waste. E-waste clinic was jointly set up by CPCB and Bhopal Municipal Corporation Commission. What is e-waste, by the way? Any electronic and electrical product that which is discarded is known as e-waste. What is the issue with e-waste? In India, only e-waste out of the total e-waste generated, minuscule percentage is recycled. And the remaining thing is left that way. That leads to pollution, land pollution, water pollution, and it is wasting the resources. That's why e-waste needs to be processed. There are rare earth minerals and precious metals such as gold in electronic goods. They need to be recovered. That means waste to wealth. Waste to wealth. This waste needs to be used to gather the resources. This philosophy is known as waste to resources philosophy. India's first e-waste e-clinic was established in Bhopal. E-waste and its importance. Next issue, very very important, Antarctic ozone hole. Antarctic ozone hole, one of the deepest, largest gap in the ozone hole. In the last 40 years, it's observed that it has closed according to World Meteorological Organization. In 1981, this is the situation of ozone hole, very very light layer. 1987, slowly started closing. 1983, September 1999, this observed ozone hole started closing slowly. And this year, it is observed that it has closed completely because of polar vortex. We will understand what is that. Before that, let us understand a little bit about ozone hole. Ozone O3 is located in stratosphere and troposphere. If it is located in the troposphere, it is considered as the pollutant because it leads to respiratory problems. And if this is located in the stratosphere, it acts as a barrier and it obstructs the UV radiation that is coming from the sun. Fluorinated CFCs when they interact with O3, active chlorine molecules are formed. This inactivated chlorine, this reacts with the O3 molecules that disintegrate the O3 molecules. So in this context, polar stratospheric clouds, they carry these hydrochloro molecules etc. into the stratosphere. That is why near the polar regions ozone holes are bigger, because from the poles stratospheric clouds, because near the poles the stratosphere is located at lesser height. So stratospheric clouds move in from the non-polar region to polar region. When they move towards the polar region, they carry these gases. When these gases interact with O3, it lessens or reduces the O3 layer that allows the UV radiation to pass through this layer, which is known as ozone hole depletion. Now, what happens if the stratospheric clouds are not there? Let us understand that. Let's say if we take Antarctic continent, tropopause comes at 9 kilometers height. Near the equatorial region, tropopause comes at 12 kilometers height, 11 to 12 kilometers height. See, when the polar vortex, that means jet stream which holds the polar air mass in the poles itself, when the polar vortex weakens, air from other regions comes towards the polar regions. When the polar vortex is stronger, it holds the air here itself, polar air here itself, without allowing the air coming from non-polar region. So as the polar vortex is stronger, it has not carried any of the gases through stratospheric clouds. That's why ozone hole depletion is lessening. And slowly we are reducing ozone depleting substances by phasing them out under various conventions. Let us understand that too. But for now, ozone depletion in Antarctic, it is influenced by the polar jet stream. This polar jet streams, they hold the polar air over the polar regions north and south. When the polar jet streams are weaker, polar vortex become weaker. When the polar vortex become weaker, stratospheric clouds move in. They carry these gases that depletes the ozone layer. But when polar vortex is stronger, it doesn't allow any of the air masses to move towards the poles. That lessens the ozone depletion. So strong polar vortex was observed recently. That is the reason for filling the gap in Antarctic. What are ozone depleting substances, by the way? Halogens, hydro-ozone depleting substances, are known as halogen gases. Some examples include halogens, methyl chloride, methyl bromide, carbon tetrachloride, methyl chloroform, CFCs, HCFCs, N2O. These are the ozone depleting substances. There are certain ozone depleting substances which acts as greenhouse gases too, such as hydrofluorochlorocarbons, CFCs, N2O. These are also global warming greenhouse gases which leads to global warming, and these are also part of ozone depleting substances. So these are examples of ozone depleting substances. Important. Indiscriminate use of chemicals can cause ozone layer depletion. To address this indiscriminate use of ozone depleting substances, Vienna Convention was signed. Under that, Montreal Protocol was brought in on ozone depletion. In the year 1985, Vienna Convention, or the Protection of Ozone Layer, Convention on Protection of Ozone Layer, it's an intergovernmental agreement under United Nations Environment Program, wherein the member countries have recognized the fundamental importance of preventing the damage to the stratospheric ozone layer. In the year 1987, Montreal Protocol under Vienna Convention, this was agreed upon, which prohibits the use of ozone, which reduces the ozone layer depletion, some of the HFCs also. And in the year 2016, Kigali Amendment was passed for Montreal Protocol, very, very important. Kigali Amendment to Montreal Protocol, under which earlier it was said that HFCs can be used, HCFCs needs to be banned, HFCs can be used. But under Kigali Agreement, it is said that HFCs cause global warming. That's why we should avoid them also. HFCs, they don't cause ozone depletion, but they cause global warming. Under Montreal Protocol, HFCs can be used, that is the agreement. But that also needs to be prohibited. And that is the Kigali Amendment, which was signed in 2016. India has ratified and started implementing from this year. Next issue is status of indoor air pollution in India. It is a study by Collaborative Clean Air Policy. This particular study says that air pollution in India is the most prevalent problem. One of the issues is solid fuels burning in households. This is one of the primary reasons for air pollution. Burning of such solid fuels such as firewood, it impacts the health of households, which accounts for 22 to 50% of total ambient air pollution in India. According to the study, switching to cleaner fuels such as LPG for households, it will dramatically reduce the pollution. That is why Ujjwala scheme, yes or no? Ujjwala scheme is launched by the government to subsidize the LPG connections. This is implemented by Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Under Ujjwala scheme, initially 2 crore households were targeted. Now under Ujjwala 2.0, additional 1 crore households are targeted to provide subsidized LPG connections. According to the study by Collaborative Clean Energy, most of the pollution most of the causes for ambient air pollution is solid fuels, burning solid fuels at the household level. It emits the particulate matter, and this leads to household air pollution. This study claims that 8 lakh premature deaths are happening in India every year because of HAP, household air pollution indoors. Please understand this. Indoor air pollution is more dangerous than outdoor air pollution. Indoor air pollution is more dangerous. Our last issue is Great Green Wall Initiative. Great Green Wall Initiative, launched by African Union in 2017, it has a hit because of funding problem. It is conceived by 11 countries located in the southern border of Sahara region. This is Saharan Desert. Southern border of Sahara region, which is called as Sahel. Sahels are grasslands. Sahel grasslands are located in Mauritania, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, Sudan, South Sudan and Ethiopia, Eritrea. These are the countries in which has the southern boundary with a Saharan desert. The grasslands here are known as Sahel grasslands. These are transitionary zones between Saharan desert and the Central African rainforests. These are the transitional zones which are known as ecotones. These Sahel regions, to promote the greenery in this particular region, to address the desertification in this region, Great Green Wall Initiative is launched. This was launched to address the desertification, land degradation and climate change in the Sahel region. Sahel region stretches from Senegal to Eritrea towards the Red Sea coast. This is our Atlantic Sea. This is the Red Sea. This is Atlantic Ocean. This is Red Sea. So this covers from this end to that end. It aims to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land by 2030 by planting the trees. Similar initiatives are there in China. Niti Aayog has proposed a similar initiative in Rajasthan region near Thar Desert transitionary zone. But in India, we have not started it. China started it. They call it as Great Green Wall of China. These are the issues of January month. Next, we will meet with February 2021 current affairs. All the very best. Thank you very much. PDF of this video is available in the description. If you want to write test series based on this video, you can click on the link mentioned below. Thank you very much. All the best.